All right, measuring public opinion. So how is public opinion measured? Public opinion is aimed at measuring a certain population. Most of the time, public opinion is measured by mass surveys. It's in person or phone interviews with hundreds or thousands of individuals. It is aimed at a particular group or area. So if people are trying to figure out how is Chris Christie perceived in Iowa ahead of the 2016 caucuses, or are they trying to figure out President Obama's national approval rating? Either way, it's aimed at representing a particular group or an area. In order to do this, you have to have a sample, because there's no possible way to actually interview all of the nearly 2 million registered voters in the state of Iowa, or the 312 million total people in the United States. It's just not possible. So what happens is mathematically, the surveyors try to pick a random sample that would represent the entire population. There's always going to be sampling error. Okay, no matter what, there's always a margin of error, or plus or minus 1 or 2%. 1 or 2%, or certainly you can see with the number of responses is up to 32%. So the margin of error is an important thing to look at when you are looking at any sort of public opinion polling. So the types of questions. You can see a picture here. This is a picture of a focus group, some graduate students in a focus group. It's really intensive, small number of respondents, but a large number of questions. So there's going to be error in there, but they're going to get complete, their goal is to get a complete pool of answers. A lot of times the focus group will be something that people do when they're, that politicians will do when they're trying to figure out a specific strategy or a specific group of terminology for their platform, or a lot of times businesses will use focus groups to pitch different catchphrases or advertisements. Here's a screenshot of one of the political spectrum quizzes that you took that gave you an issue scale. Okay, this is, you're asked to pick a statement closest to your beliefs. There's a lot of different options. As you can barely see on there, the question is, how do you feel about the following? There need to be stricter laws and regulations to protect the environment. Do you completely agree, mostly disagree, or completely disagree? So the issue scale then sort of assigns a value to each one of those. The last one is the one that you guys least liked, which was a forced answer. They force you into one statement or the other, regardless of if you feel different than that. There's only two options given. Respondents are forced to take one side or the other. The concept is that they would be, that it would eventually sort of average out in between the statements over a large number of statements to get an accurate ideological sort of picture. So it's really hard to actually get a random sample. Every person in the group has to have an equal chance of being selected. So if you're looking at something over a really large period or a large group of people, well, then you have to really genuinely have to be able to try to get everybody to be in that position. Most political polling is completed by phone. So what's the problem there? Well, not everybody has a phone. And for a while, a lot of political polling was only landlines. So people like me and my family don't have a landline, never have. So we weren't involved in a lot of polling. And that has changed over the last few years because of people's realization of that. So finding a random sample is difficult because everybody has to have the option, or has to have the possibility of being selected. And frankly, homeless people are included in that if it's a true random sample. Also, the wordings of the questions are difficult because sometimes it's tough not to lead respondents to a particular answer. So you have to, when they're doing polling, have to be very careful with what specific kind of questions that they're asking and what words they're using in the question. Push polling is something that they're intentionally trying to lead people into answering something. If they say something like, if they ask a question about is Barack Hussein Obama doing enough to stop terrorism? Obviously, by using his middle name on purpose, they're pointing out some things about Barack Obama, about his ethnicity, that's an example of push polling. Also, respondents are unreliable. People lie. People answer differently based on social desirability. So, for example, if they ask questions about race, a lot of times people won't answer their true feelings because they recognize that being racist, for example, is not socially desirable. So even if they are racist, they won't say it. If the doctor asks me how many cups of coffee I have every day, I know that he or she wants to hear 3 cups, but and I have 6 or 9, so I'm gonna say 3. So people lie about situations to sound more socially desirable all the time, but so that's particularly true in polling as well. Some respondents may say they intend on voting, but end up not doing so. Personal opinions often change from day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour, based on our mood. Some people don't take the survey seriously. Also, you guys found this when you're doing your ideological surveys. Some topics you don't care about, but you're still forced to answer them. So that creates this illusion of saliency, which means that it looks like voters care about that particular topic, but in reality they don't. They were just forced to answer it. So the last one is oftentimes there's a bandwagon effect, and when there is social momentum, when more and more people are acceptable of a particular thing or action, then others can jump onto the bandwagon. So I just wanted to take you through a handful of Gallup polls that I pulled off of the website here recently. And I think the first few of them, you can really see a connection between them. So we've talked a little bit in class about how Democrats and Republicans have become more polarized ideologically, how they've worked less together, and how they've created sort of a more left or more right America with less in between. So this is a poll of ideological self-identification. And you can see here, how would you describe your own political views? You can see that 38% are conservative, 34% are moderate, right, and 23% are liberal, and that was in 2013. But if America was really polarizing, what would that line look like? The line would look like, it would look different. You would see a raising of conservative, you would see a raising of liberal, and you would see a decrease in moderates. However, that's not what's going on. The next, you can see party identification. What's occurred is there's been an increased percentage of people that are willing to label themselves as independent, and a smaller percent over time willing to label themselves Republican and even Democrat to a degree. So I think that you can see that there's polarization within the party, but people are still sort of calling themselves independent and trying to be, maybe as a response to the polarization of the parties. Of course, we can't tell, we can only draw conclusions. And maybe this one, satisfaction with how government works, will also tell us some things. Please say whether you are satisfied, somewhat satisfied, or somewhat dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied with our system of government and how well it works. This is very and somewhat dissatisfied added together. And as you can see, the low point here is after September 11th, 2001. The low point is actually where most people are satisfied with the government. And the high point here has been in 2012 and 2014. As you can see, people are very dissatisfied with the way that the government is running. So I'm interested to see as we go forward in the future what sort of political ramifications these results will have. That's the same slide. Again, trust in the government. This is each particular branch and its trust. As you can see, the judicial branch has been higher all the time, for the most part, before 1973. It looks like it wasn't, but the judicial branch has sort of been perceived as a higher trust, and that's been lowered recently. I think 2010 was Citizens United decision, but so that's been I think an impact on the judicial branch. But certainly, if you look at executive and legislative, they also hit a downwards trend there. So it may have to do with the economy as well. Again, we can't tell. We can only sort of guess what's going on. You can see here, again, September 2011, you can see the executive branch gets a nice little bump after September 11th. So Obama's job approval, well, this is separated based on political party. I suppose this isn't a major surprise, but you can see 82% of the Democrats are happy and 11% of the Republicans are not happy with Barack Obama. And of course, you always sort of get a bump here, even with the Republicans after the 2008 election. So, or after your election. So that was his highest point among Republicans because frankly, more people are willing to give him a chance after he becomes president. Here are his numbers overall. Okay, you can see right after he was inaugurated, his numbers are up in the 60s, and then they've fallen pretty low into the 40s. That's historically low as well. So his numbers are not doing very well. Now, that pattern typically occurs in every two-term president. There is a slow or a fast, in this case, downtrend, and then sort of an uptick on the election, and then a downtick, and really stays low for the remaining of that president's second term. So marijuana legalization, that has a large uptick since 2009. That is a massive change, especially if you look at how wide the gap has been earlier in 1980s and the 1970s. It slowly closed, but then there's probably the bandwagon effect as, yes, marijuana should be legal, and certainly it comes with marijuana becoming legal in certain states. So again, that's probably bandwagon effect. In fact, just recently the state of Iowa has shown that over 60% of people support legalization of medical marijuana in the state of Iowa. It's not come to fruition yet, but so things are changing. Now, gay and lesbian rights, this one, the question I think you can look at, do you think gay or lesbian relations between consenting adults should or should not be legal? Now, that is a different question than you would anticipate about marriage. But certainly you can see here there's an uptick in should be legal and should not be legal. Weapons restrictions. In general, do you feel laws covering the sales of firearms should be made strict, less strict, keep as they are now? And this is an example of a issue of saliency. These people down here, these are people that think that there should be less restrictions in gun control. That is very important to many of these people. So they actually hold a large sway over the government, and there's a lot of action that is involved. These people here, this is an illusion of saliency oftentimes. Keep as it now, or I think there should be more strict. Those types of responses are not such the wedge issue, such an important issue as the people that think it should be less strict. So they take larger action, the people who think it should be less strict, so therefore influence more. Climate change, you can see in the 2000s that the majority of people believe human activities has increased the Earth's temperature, but you can see there's been with sort of the Republican resurgence after the election of 2008, Republicans won the House and made gains in the Senate in 2010. That's correlated there, or that happened at the same time as this uptick in natural cause beliefs. So will that continue? I'm not entirely sure. So do politicians use opinion polls? In Lowey, he says he claims that the minority may have more saliency for the issue, so public opinion polls don't matter. The system of government is conservative, so through using opinion and through it's difficult for public opinion to actually change policy. In Chapter 10, and this is a mistype, and in the Lanahan reading, the idea is that politicians shape their message. They don't use public opinion to shape their political support. They actually craft their message to bring out the support in people, even if they're not changing their positions. So can you think of counterexamples? Can you think of examples where the public opinion changes and then policy changes after that? Obviously, I think that there's there's examples in that. I mean, otherwise it would be pretty hard to claim that we're a democracy. But some of the ones I can think of is gay marriage, where that public opinion is out in front of a lot of state laws and national laws, because even the majority of Americans in 2014, the majority of Americans are okay with gay marriage, and yet there's only a handful of states where that's the case. Same thing with marijuana laws I just talked about. Iowa, the people of Iowa think that medical marijuana should be okay and legalized, and frankly, it would be very surprising if that didn't eventually happen in the state of Iowa, but it hasn't happened yet. So public opinion is sort of out in front. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, you could also throw in there Vietnam, the protest and the sort of public was weary and tired of war in those situations, so they've pushed to gear down, and the United States government has eventually geared those down. So the question is, are there others? And we made some lists of this in class.